Hello, chess friends. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and today we're going to be talking about a really incredible topic. In fact, I can't recall the last time when I've had a lecture on that. And we're talking about the time pressure. See, the idea with time pressure is that when you are in time pressure, you know, people start thinking really fast and really smart. Trouble is, obviously that's very dangerous because you can make superficial moves and then the game could slip very quickly. Some people panic, even though I know that, I know there are people, there are strong players even, who kind of have this habit of getting in time trouble in order to get that intense experience, and sometimes they win out of those positions. So today I'm going to give you some interesting methods. I'm going to explain to you the keys, very important keys about how to avoid getting in time trouble, how to manage your time correctly, how to get out of a bad time trouble situation. If you've already gotten into one, you know, it can happen to the best. And more importantly, I will tell you how time affects the position, how to create that perfect balance and manage to, you know, think about the quality moves without letting the time affect the process of thinking. So, what are we going to actually start with? We're going to start with a pretty impressive game. This is a game that was played between Magnus Carlsen himself versus Fabiano Caruana. And we're going to talk about what really went on in this game. What happened between these two players and how did this whole thing affect the result, affect the outcome of the game. So I'm going to copy it right now so we could see it together. Here we go. So Carolina was actually playing with the white pieces in this game. So we're going to look at it basically from Carlsen's perspective. The game started off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and pawn to the b5. So there was like the Spanish game, bishop to the b7. What we see is a major theoretical line, and because we would like to talk a little bit about time, I don't want to spend so much time discussing the opening or anything. I'm just going to tell you that if you ever have problems in the opening with time, like you're spending too much time thinking, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the line that you may not know. I mean, it could be that for sure. But most likely, the problem is that you are not aware of the typical positions. This is why I recommend most of the chess players who want to master the opening. Okay, learn the major beats of the opening. Like, what is the major goal? Like here, the black goal is to put the bishop against the center, then support the middle, play knight a5, and so on. But also study many games. Studying master games, especially games that have been won for the particular side you're playing, is incredibly important. That will help you. This is key because it will help you to stay ahead. And what I mean is that you will know what you're supposed to do. So you wouldn't have to spend so much time in the opening and trying to figure it out. A lot of the Grandmaster games show the structures, how they change, what the goals are, and so on and so forth. That is important, not just from the time perspective, but for the opening perspective, like the setup. You want to know as many games as possible. You want to look at as many games as possible so you can create that feel, so you can understand the major goals for the player you're playing with. So basically d3, bishop e7, white plays knight c3 here. We get short castles by black. Now white did a3. Going forward, d6, rook e1, rook e1, queen d7 happen. So far, so good. I mean, this is a very simplistic development. And I think that I'm not sure, basically, when was the time when Caruana started spending quite a bit of time, but it must be around here somewhere. So knight e2. Now, when do we get to spend more time thinking? Usually, it is in positions that are most critical. I mean, this is where you want to spend more time, where basically it's what I would call as life or death moment. Like you either pick a good move and you win, or you pick a bad move and you lose. The truth is, you're going to notice that with most players who get themselves in time trouble, that's totally not the case. In fact, oftentimes when they get to that point, they already are in time trouble and they have to play fast and mistakes happen. So I believe there is simply one major reason for getting in time trouble. The Probably the most common reason for people to get in time trouble is the fact that they overthink the different variations and possibilities that both they and the opponent have in the simple positions, in positions where you really don't have to think. So what happens is that they keep analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, and it just most of that analysis doesn't make any difference in the position. But more importantly, they spend a lot of time. And when the important moment hits the fan, they don't really have it. They don't have the time to figure out the right move. So before we talk about how to avoid this, you'd like to know why that occurs. Now that has to do with the psychology, but more importantly, it has to do with something else. The biggest reason why most chess players take more time than enough, like they overthink in rather simple positions, is because they try to calculate everything they can about a position with infinite possibilities. Here's the idea. If we have a tactical position or a more dynamic position, let's say, there are a fixed amount of possibilities that lead to critical conclusion. Like we have, I will attack him here, he will defend like that, I'll try this. I mean, it's easier to see a concrete ending. While in the positions like this one, which are rather, quiet and positional, they can float in any direction, there is no concrete ending. And this is where the problem comes. Even though these positions are not fairly critical, people try to really reach a conclusion by the end of their analysis. And because they can't reach that conclusion, they keep thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And so what happens is that basically all that time they spend analyzing is pretty much wasted. So what I need you to do is to understand that there is no point in overthinking, especially in the simple positions. What you will do right now could affect the game in 5 or 6 different ways going on, and you may not be even aware of 2 of them. So what it means is that the game can go in many different directions. You can't calculate everything. The possibilities are infinite. So what I want you to do is to figure out a goal, a very specific goal, something you want out of this position. Not like a super goal of checkmating the opponent, a very specific thing you want out here. And then consider at least a couple or a few different candidate moves that will follow that goal. Now, once you do that, you can compare between those moves, and when you find one that's decent enough or better than the others, pick that up. If none of them work in this particular way, none of them reach you to that specific goal, maybe you can think of a couple other candidates. But again, there's going to be an ending to this. You're not going to be able to think about like 10 very different variations because you all have only one goal for this position. And usually there are no more than 2, 3, sometimes at the maximum, I'd say 4 major candidates. Now, this is very relevant. So figure out one simple goal and a few different candidates. Now, that's not the end of it, but let's do that in this position. So what does black want to do now? We've finished the development in a way. We've connected the rooks. Usually, the major goal of the early middle game is to improve the pieces. So we need to figure out how to improve the pieces. There are a couple of moves that work, like rook d8 and rook e8. There's an idea of playing probably d5 to open up the bishop. And maybe a chance to get that knight better. I mean, I wouldn't say a5 is that good because it will be away. Probably knight d8 to e6, even though it looks a little ugly. So we have a good set of candidates. Now, there's another problem because even if you have a goal and even if you have those moves, you could still go in that direction of overcalculating. You think, okay, if I play rook d8, you play bishop g5, rook e8, knight g3. Remember, this is a quiet position. Most of that calculation does not matter. In 80% of the times, this is never going to happen. Your analysis is not going to have any effect, any impact on what's going to come in the game. So it's basically a wasted time and energy. The only thing that matters when you actually start calculating the different candidates that follow that goal, you've said, is how can my opponent challenge or attack my position? And eventually, if he doesn't have a way to attack or challenge your position, what will be this, the sequence of moves I can follow with this? For example, let's look at the move of rook to the d8. Could white figure out a way to challenge us? Not immediately, but maybe you can think about knight g3. And eventually, if we play with a move like rook e8, he can play knight f5. There is going to be a little bit of a challenge there. The sequence is not very clear because that knight's going to put pressure against g7. It's going to keep us behind. And if we go back, eventually that will be more passive. So we really don't want that. Now take a look at this. We make a very short analysis. This is very important when you're looking at the more static positions like this one. There's nothing big that's going to happen. The bigger, the further you go with your calculation, you know, the more it goes into your fantasy, so to speak. Like, just you're looking at lines that will never ever happen. You're going much further away from from what this position is all about. So don't go too long with your calculation. This is important. Now you can make long scheme of, okay, I want to do this move and this move and this move and this move. Like schematically, you want to think about it. And like if you're thinking, okay, I want to do this and then I want to do this and this and this. But this is not calculation. That's sort of schematically imagining where you want to have the pieces. When it comes down to calculation, it's very important. Keep it short. The tighter it is, the more it will relate to, the concrete possibilities, and you will keep it more towards the plan. This is important. Don't go long calculations in quiet positions. That's useless. It will take you a lot of time. It will never come into play. So we saw that rook d8 falls down towards knight g3, knight f5. Now rook e8, I think, suffers the same problem. Okay, so what else can we do? On knight d8, even more so, because we have a problem. We've made analysis. We've seen that knight on f5 coming in, and that's blocking us. Now, if there was no knight g3 and knight f5, we would easily make the move of rook to the d8. But then knight g3 and knight f5 is paralyzing us, or the thought of it. And that's the other very common issue with getting in time trouble. We see a possibility by the opponent that we don't like, and we try to focus all our attention towards how to prevent it, how to stop it, what do we do about it, how do we handle this. Now, I need to tell you something. Not every good-looking idea by the opponent, not every maneuver has that menace inside it. This means you don't have to worry about every good move he's got. When you really need to worry is when you see that this maneuver or that move he's planning to play is going to result in a threat against you. Very big idea. If you see that possibility resulting in a threat, you know that this is something you got to fight against. If you don't see the threat coming, that means you can, if you do have a way, of course, you want to prevent it. But if you don't, that's okay. Nothing bad's going to happen. We actually want to focus on that second idea, which I meant is think about the sequence. Like, what will this move give you in the long run? After rook d8 and rook e8, I don't really get to see where these pieces are going. d5 just doesn't look as strong, especially if he plays knight g3. But if I can imagine this knight coming from d8 to e6, opening the bishop, maybe going for c5, together with the rooks, then I feel like we're going to be more protected than the king side. And even though I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle figured out, it feels like it's going to be more capable as opposed to rook d8. So I would like us to go through the steps of this position because there's a lot of steps that come into play here, so you know how to avoid taking too long. First thing, consider the two, I call them the characters of a position. We got static and we got dynamic. We got like static is simple, quiet. Dynamic is more tactical, more complicated. Usually in the dynamic positions, which are a lot more complicated, you want to spend more time thinking. That's the natural process. But in most times, we spend more than enough time on the quiet positions that simply can't be calculated. They don't have that definitive result. So what's important for you is when you get yourself in these more simple positions, more quiet positions, you figure out a small goal, like a relatively easy to achieve goal that probably can be achieved in the next 5 or 6 moves. Then figure out a few different candidates that can actually pursue that goal and start analyzing them by thinking how the opponent could oppose you, like what sort of threats he can make. That's very easy. The shorter the calculation you make, you know, the better it's going to be. Remember, the position is not going to change big time. You don't have to go too long. Just see it, a few moves, 3, 4 moves ahead, just to get an idea of where it's going. Most important thing, when you're calculating, when you're analyzing any of these number of move candidates that follow your goal, the most important thing you need to keep in your mind is how the opponent can challenge you. That means how he can threaten you. It's very important to define threat. Threat is where he could damage your position. If he can't damage your position, it's not a threat. It's a good move, yes, but it's not a threat. Very important. So think about that. If he doesn't have a threat against you, that's fine. The most valuable thing that you need to have is a sequence. So if you're thinking about rook d8, rook e8, both of these moves lead to the same sequence. Nothing much is going to come from those moves. They don't bring us too much. It's still good, but not too much. Now, when we think about knight d8 and knight e6, it looks better. We're opening up c5 or knight c5. We have a little bit more flexibility for our bishop. The rooks can come in. Yes, we can't play d5, but there are other moves. Maybe knight d4 can come into play. See, there's more of a sequence ahead. Keep in mind, we're not calculating. Projecting the ways of our pieces to go forward or maneuver through different squares is not calculation. You actually don't want to calculate too long, or you don't even sometimes want to calculate at all unless you could see how the opponent's going to challenge him. So your opponent's threats and possibilities will affect the length of your calculation, and more importantly, they will affect the speed on how fast you go about this. The slower the position, the less you have to calculate, the more you can trust your instincts and focus on, gradually improving your position. Now, I know that for some of you, this will all sound complicated, but, this is the only way for me to break it down as to what you have to do. So, quiet position. There's no major threats by white. Black figured out the goal to improve his position. He came up with a few different candidates. Knight d8 to knight e6 provides the best looking sequence. So with the least amount of calculation, we'll bring over our pieces, and step by step, the position gets better. This is called schematic thinking. Now, this is very difficult to do in a game if you haven't practiced it. But if you practice on following that technique, the more you get better at it, the stronger you will play and the faster you will play. So this is what players like Carlsen and others actually apply very effectively in their games. While most people just keep calculating again and again and again over the same line, they spend a lot of time and they don't bring any new information. Carlsen and other players know how to exclude those lines, focus on one goal, consider the candidate moves that follow that, evaluate the strength or danger of the opponent's possibilities, and essentially decide on which is the most prospective of those candidates that will help them to grow their position. See, we basically summarize the whole process within one large sentence. So now after rook to the e8, white plays knight g5. So I'd like you to tell me, what would you guys think or do in this position? Very important. So where should white go now? Let's see. Okay, now while you're thinking about this, I'd like to point out a couple of things. First of all, this is a great position for practicing, but let's see what black should do. Now, while you're thinking, I do want to tell you that right below this, right below the video, there is a link, actually, to the fantastic Naroditsky course, Naroditsky method course, that is only available for a couple hours with the incredible 50% off. You might want to check that link. It is right below the video, and it's It's a really great course. It's a really great package that's being set up. So check it out. Um, I think Naroditsky spends quite some time on bringing practical advice like this in his lectures. This is one of the examples that he is giving in his new course. So you might want to take a look at this. But yeah, so what's really necessary in here is to discover where to go now. Now just take this second and think about this yourself. What if bishop f, okay, why did not white play knight f5? Because there was no danger. That's what I was actually saying just a moment ago. He could have played that move, but there's no real danger. Black would have played bishop f8 and everything would be fine. So white wanted to just challenge e6. So what's the best way to go here? c5. Not a bad idea. I have to admit it's probably not that horrible. After all, we do like to do it. Did black do it? No. See, that's important. What he did in this position was d5. Remember the goal. I like to say that the goal that you have in a given position is your spine. Like imagine if you play a game without a spine, you're going to be wandering around not knowing what to do. Now we could say that, okay, there's like one move idea, but that's not a spine. Spine is something that sets up, at least we could say that for us, for a particular stage of the game, it sets up everything you're going to do. So basically, in order to maintain a spine, you need to have those, like specific, not maybe not necessarily long-term goals. Could be a little short-term, but important goals that you set. Like for the move of pawn to d5, that actually looks quite good. So now what we do is we play that. Essentially, black has a problem. He exchanges the knight. White has a problem. He exchanges the knight on e6. Black plays queen takes to the e6. See, nothing dangerous. Look dangerous. Makes you worried. Makes you spend time. Don't do it. Take the time to build. Bishop g5, h6. Something interesting about Carlsen's games is that usually they're incredibly simple. In times where people are going to, deviate from the normal, line of thought or whatever, Carlsen makes these simple, quiet moves that look so easy, and he gets brilliant positions with them. Now, that's what you want to do in most times. What you'd like to do is ultimately step up, get everything right, and, just this is perfect. We can think about rook to the d8 in this moment. We can think about a good challenge in this position towards the e file, the d file. Things look great. So what's happening? Well, after bishop takes f6, bishop takes f, queen f3, and c6. See, this is how you could play a game, sometimes even a whole game until the very end, without having to calculate almost anything. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to be able to play like that. And I'm not saying that you should be able to play like that. What I'm actually saying is that you might want to consider it. Because in most occasions, that's how you would plan. Step by step, we got the d6, the d5 covered. We've got moves like rook to the d8 that will come out pretty quickly. The bishops are great, and the rest of our pieces are also pretty well set up. So let's just do it. We're good to go. Things are good. So let's see. Next move. White played c4. So here we have more of a critical moment. Yeah, those take some time to think, but usually you would like to take some time in these positions. They're not too many moves, and you'd usually evaluate a critical move as this one that really is going to change the structure in one way or another. Not necessarily one that's losing or not, but one that changes it dramatically. Like if you change the structure by playing h3, that wouldn't be dramatic. Even if you played edicts to the d, that wouldn't be dramatic because we'll just get an open c file. The structure more or less remains the same. But c4 changes it in a very special way. If we take on e4, he would like to take back. He'd like to open up that light square bishop. I mean, a lot of what used to be great for us is not going to be the same anymore. So how do we spend our time not rationally here? The first thing you need to know about the critical moments is figure out the danger. Now, this is very necessary because if you just keep calculating moves and then you see that they don't work and you look for how to make them work, you haven't really figured out the source of the problem. And I got to tell you, a critical position is everything but, simple in terms of character. You got to understand things are going to change very quickly, and they can change dangerously, badly, or good. That's up to you. What is the danger, however? Big question. So what's the danger here? He's attacking the d5 pawn. If we take, he captures. He'd open up the light square bishop pretty quickly. We could take on e4, but then you likely play, take back, attack through f6, and go towards c5. So in all these positions, all these moves, while I certainly recommend that you be careful, White is going to open up his pieces and he's going to start making different challenges. So what we're looking to do, very importantly, is to avoid changes of that kind and focus our attention on something else. You see, so what else can we try? What else can we do in this position? Very, very big query here. A very large idea that Black was having in this moment is actually to think about simple, not so much a move like d takes to the c4, but rook to d8. If the danger was to open up the position and let White's pieces come into play, I guess we could pretty easily avoid that danger by maintaining a strong hold in the center. I mean, why not? If we maintain a pretty strong hold there, there is going to be no danger. And we want that. One of the key ideas is that you discover the danger and then you fight against that. Or you consider the possibilities that can help you fight that. In that case, it's pretty relevant. So let's take a look. After continuing with the move rook a to d8, now White played c takes to d5, c takes to d5, knight f5 here. And he's actually intending to play knight e3 most likely in challenge. So Carlsen did bishop g5. Now take a look at this. He is holding White from being able to achieve exactly what he wanted to attack. And that's actually easy. Again, we don't need that much of analysis, that much of calculation. We just want to keep a gradually strong active position and fight off his tactics. Of course, that always requires that you think a couple moves ahead, but not more than that. See, a few moves ahead, what I call initial analysis or even slower analysis to check that doesn't take time. Everybody does that. The most of the time is being spent or rather wasted in overthinking different ideas and possibilities without really asking ourselves questions. Questions like, what's the danger? What is my opponent going to do? What are the real threats in the position? Do I have to defend them? Logical questions, which will help you instead of going over one line again and again and again, to simply stop, answer the question, and drop the line, or perhaps conclude it, or maybe figure out a new possibility. I've always found it very helpful to ask myself questions during the game, and most people don't do it. Most people think automatically, what I call it, so by default, like I go here, he goes there, I go here, he goes there. They don't even say that. They just think about, okay, this. They, in a way, masters think like that, most of them. But we want to do it differently, unless at least we've reached that level where all of that knowledge is ingrained in our minds, so we could do that by default. You see, asking questions is one of the best ways on how you're going to be able to combine the two most important things when you're thinking in chess. Being able to analyze the most important lines, the most critical lines that you need to, as short as possible, and come up with solid conclusions as to what's good and what's bad so that you could follow with the right move. See, very relevant idea. So if you can only combine them by basically trying to follow my suggestions about goals, about candidates, but also asking questions. Asking yourself questions about the position that you find more relevant. Logical questions, like you're really controlling your thought process. Don't try to control it. Just think about it. Like, so, okay, you're saying this move and this move and this move. Ask yourself, why am I analyzing this? Is this really good for me? Like, what am I missing here? All sorts of questions. You can always figure out some good ones. So in that case, after rook e2, black plays d takes 3, d takes 3, and queen to f6. And so we have a pretty good position here. There's no danger coming by white, and things are actually pretty solid. The bishop is defended, the other one's kind of pressuring, and the rest of our pieces seem to be in place for the attack. Very good. So what's coming next? Okay, obviously, white plays g3. And now I'm going to talk about a third point. Third point where people spend more of their time is to answer one question. What the hell do I do now? Sometimes you ask yourself that question, sometimes not, but essentially it's the same dilemma. What the hell do I do? I've got this position, I've got those pieces, and I've got this thing, and damn it, I don't know. And that's where we actually go within that. I call that the circle. Like, imagine that thinking is like a circle. So essentially the idea is you go from point 1 to point B to point C to point D in a circle. Now, eventually the circle ends, and then you resume that the same way. You go through the very same variations over and over again in order to find out something different, but usually it's the same. So you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it. Now, you have no idea how much time does that take. The reason why this happens, and it takes so much time for us to think like this, is because we rarely focus on the problem. Now, just as important as I mentioned to you, it is to think about, keep that in mind, about asking yourself questions, about setting up a goal, about thinking candidates. As important it is to do that, I'd say it is even more important that you conclude what the problem in a given position is. What the problem in a given position is. Now, how the hell do you find that? You know there's a problem, okay? You want to find out what it is, okay? How do you do that? Now, this is going to be a little more complicated, but if you listen to me, I'm going to give you a pretty good technique you could try in your games. Finding a problem in your position, or defining what it is, usually goes within one of these three major categories. I mean, I'd say not every problem is going to be there, but 80% is going to be like that. One, it's when there is a weakness, something you have to defend, tying all your pieces down so you can't move on. Two, it is the pawns and the whole structure that makes you feel restricted, limited, no possibilities. And three, it's the opponent's pieces just being so much stronger than yours. All of these three, happen to go in one category. It's the restriction that you feel, like the limitations. Could be either it's because he's attacking you, you're restricted because of your own pieces, or maybe you're restricted because of his pieces. But we have these three major categories. Now, I'm not saying that there are no other kinds of problems. Sometimes it's just that we have to defend the checkmate, but again, it's restriction. See, you can't find a solution because you're in some way restricted. Okay? Now, knowing the type is important because if you look at these three very specific categories, you may just as well find out which of these three is limiting your position at that point. Which of these three happens to be the problem? Like if he's attacking you, for example, usually that's because you've got a weakness. Now, not always you can run away with that weakness, but perhaps you can figure out a way how to strengthen the defense of it, or maybe even, I don't know, sacrifice it or look for a counterattack, whatever it is. Once you identify the problem, it's a lot easier. If it's your pawns, maybe you can think about, or your pieces, maybe you can think about improving them, exchanging them, getting some open lines. Could be anything. In this position, however, it was white's pieces, in particular that knight, which is really holding us back. Therefore, all that black had to do was the move king f8. I would say a super cool move. It goes for the idea of g6, which was earlier impossible due to knight takes h6. Queen was hanging. So when we play king f8, now there's g6 as a threat, and that's why it prevents it. Now we're given a little more freedom because we open the road of the rook. See, think about it like that. If you find yourself in a position where you feel stuck, it's usually because you're restricted. If you're not restricted, you'll feel that the position is bad, but you will see possibilities for yourself. When you're stuck, it means you're limited. And that limitation, and most times, comes from these three categories. Don't forget them. We got pressure by the opponent caused because he's attacking, pressure because your pieces don't have the ability to move out, and pressure because his pieces is pressuring and challenging yours back. See, identify it, and you can find a way to fight it. Right now, it was that knight on f5. We did a pretty good job in trying to get rid of it, forcing white to give us an important square. And so now black is slowly starting to expand. You can see that. King can even come back to the g8. Doesn't need to be exposed anymore. And we could actually continue improving. Now, I'd like to know what you would guys do in this position because it's very important, very relevant. So while you're thinking, just wanted to tell you this is like we've reached an important point in the game where a new sort of element needs to be added. So I'd like to know, what would you guys do? That's black here. Now, once again, do want to remind you about the fantastic course by Grandmaster Naroditsky, who points out a lot of practical suggestions in such a way. So you might want to check that out. It is a great lecture, set of lectures. Actually, it's only available for the next couple hours. I've posted a link on the chat, but you can also check it right on the link below this video. Exclusive 50% off, an incredible course by young and very strong grandmaster. So, going back to the position, what should black do now? Remember what I told you, most of the times we spend a lot of time in quiet positions in here. But we don't have to. So what do we do now? G6 is impossible. The bishop's good, and probably we don't have a specific problem, but yeah, what do we do? Anyone? Now, keep looking. This is a position where you would probably not know what to do. And sometimes that gets on my nerves, when people say that. Not because, you know, it's very difficult for them to find out what to do, but rather because they don't know. And that's why, in a way, I feel very grateful, because when they share that problem with me, I tell them, you know what? I have the perfect solution. And then I say, I've been teaching for many, many years now. And I've been teaching lots of different techniques about attacking, defending, improving, name it. But there's one technique that stood out for me as the simplest yet most effective technique that helps a certain position to improve. Now, I saw a lot of suggestions by you guys on the chat, but none of these is really as important. It is, yes, finally got the right move. It's about improving the worst place piece. Not that rook, but the other that comes right behind it. Think about it. If you have a problem figuring out a move, usually it is because of something. Now, you're not always going to be able to find out what that cause is. Like if you're restricted, yes, we figured out the categories. You could probably think about them, but that's not a guarantee as well. What is a guarantee is that you could always think about the bad pieces you've got. What's my worst place piece? I always say that thing is the key to unlocking the hidden power of your position. You take that, you bring it in, and how you have a wonderful position all of a sudden in no time. So that's what black did. Rook d7, perfect move. White plays rook a4. Now we do king h8. Why? Well, I guess to unpin the f7, letting that pawn fall, and then there's g6. Now, that knight was a problem, so we got rid of it finally. H takes g, f takes g, and white had an issue here. He could have played knight h4, bishop takes h4. I think this is the moment where Caruana was in deep time trouble, and in fact, he had to work out much less than black. Now, you may be wondering where that might mess it up. I don't think he had a goal. See, black had a goal of coordinating and improving his pieces, of dealing with the pressure. White did not. So practically, he was not having the spine to hold this position together when this stuff really starts happening. In b3, bishop c6. See, black is so much better coordinated. His activity is so much more powerful. That bishop challenging the middle, the queen around, even the other bishop. It's all there. It's happening. Bishop takes c4, bishop d5, and then actually bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, and essentially queen to the c6. White plays knight c3, and black simply comes up with a move of queen f3. White plays queen c2, and rook to the d8, rook e4, rook d2. And just take a look at how it really happens. How every single piece on its own starts to challenge white, threaten him, pressure him, keep him on the backside, while white has almost nothing to do but exchange. Now there's f2 that hangs, and it's a killer. That goal, these little improvements that black had as opposed to white, really leave him in a much more successful game. And you see, it's not about the single most useful calculation that was created either by white or black. It wasn't at all about that. It was about how it develops over time. This is a lot more important. Again, if you have a tactical, super tactical position, yes, you might need to calculate it a lot longer. Again, though, keep in mind that you don't have to probably calculate it too much longer. You just want to calculate it, precisely. And yet, usually, the shorter analysis of the position that we do, with more questions that you ask yourself about the changes that occur through the position, and so on, that's a lot more important. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for joining me for the analysis of this game. Now, this is just a little portion of what I have to say about managing time. Now, if any of you have any questions to ask me about this or anything else, you can feel free to do it via email at valeri.lilov@gmail.com, or just visit my website, which is tigerlilov.com. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may be having. And in the meantime, don't forget to check the fantastic Naroditsky Method Volume 2 course that is just being released. It has some of the fantastic young grandmaster secrets of how to handle practical chess. So managing time is one of them. He gives a very powerful approach on how to do that. So you can check that out. And I definitely look forward to talking to you next week, next Saturday at the very same time. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a great weekend.